Hello, welcome to the next level, and welcome to the SEGA Mega Master show again. We have the usual crew with us. Viraj, hello.
Hello.
Steve-O, hello.
Yo.
And flying blind today, Rick. Hello. Yeah, good
What's
lad.
up?
We're going to be talking about the Master System version of Outrun. So I'm going to pass you over to Viraj, who's going to introduce it.
All right, good people. Today we're obviously talking about Outrun, the Master System version, which was actually the first home port. It's the first home port of Sega's prolific 1986 Superscalar arcade, developed by Yu Suzuki of Sega's AM2 arcade division. And he was famous for creating these experience games which involve superscaling. Which basically means it's an experience game where you're going into a horizon, into a distance, and the scenery's coming at you. And not just, obviously we had Space Harrow I mentioned, you got Outrun, we got Afterburner, Super Hang On, and Hang On as well. However, this was the one that was the real big hit that everybody seems to talk about. And again, it had like 20 ports throughout its lifespan. This game is just truly timeless. It just had so many ports. However, going back to the point I made earlier, this was the first home port of this game. So this actually beat the microcomputer to it, because there wasn't, a Commodore 64 and an Amstrad CPC, ZX Spectrum. You name it, it had a port. It was a port of Outrun. I mean, for me, how was I introduced to this amazing game? Well, it wasn't the Master System version. It wasn't even the Mega Drive version. I mean, I was aware of it because by the time I discovered it was on an emulator somewhere, I downloaded the ROM, but I didn't know it was that great. I was just shifting through games I might have missed out on. It's only when I was in my sort of mid to late teens, when the Game Boy Advance was my handheld that I run around. I was in a shop with a good friend of mine that I used to work with called Darren, and he said, "Oh, look at this game, and it's called, I've got it here right now, it's called Sega Arcade Gallery, and it's basically got the best of all four Sega like superscalar games, and see Outrun's in there." And he picked it up and he actually mentioned Outrun being the game that was really good. And I said, "Well, I've played Super Hang On because I had that on the Mega Drive. That was my super, but I didn't have Outrun." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And then I was under-nard, and the next day I went into the shop and bought that game, and that was it. And again, the game that I played mostly on this particular port was Outrun, and that's when I sort of fell in love with the series, and I started to visit the ports and the arcade version and all the different various versions of the game I have. I have the Saturn version, which is the best home console port of the arcade you could get at the time. I know there's a Dreamcast version as well, but that was exclusive to the market. But yes, it truly is a great game. And going back even further, if you look at that first port, which is what this review is about, the Master System version, as we saw from the pictures, it's actually quite a faithful adaptation from the arcade version, given the technology constraints at the time. It was on a 2 megabit cartridge. So yes, again, you got the three sounds of the game. For those in Japan that were lucky, they had an FM module for the Master System, so you can get FM sound with it, should they choose it. We can't, but now with modern day emulation, you can play the game with FM sound. So yeah, for me, my first experience with Outrun was a Game Boy game. With regret, my first experience playing this Master System game for review purposes is now actually, as of now, to really give it a proper run through. Obviously, I've played it a few years back, but once you play the 16-bit port of it on the Mega Drive, which is included on the Mega Drive Mini too, the Master System one isn't the most attractive one, and you're judging it on aesthetics, not on gameplay, which isn't fair. So for the purposes of review, I've taken that prejudice out of my head and played it for what it is. But yeah, that's Outrun in a nutshell, basically. A great superscalar game ported on all these various formats. The Master System is the first port. Let's have a look at what people have to say about it. But yeah, let's go back to you, Dan.
Cheers, buddy. Nice one. So let's see what Steve-O's first memory of this game is, mate. Let's hear Steve-O on this.
All right, so let me get into Master System mode here.
There you go.
Oh,
3D massive.
3D glasses.
I'm from America, man. We didn't have Master System in our houses back then. We had NES. So for me, as far as playing Outrun at the arcade, for sure. That was one of my favorite games to play in the arcade. I could just pump quarters in that thing all day long. You got to get those checkpoints. It's important. Want to make it to the beach. I love that. In the game they would show you like your route that you had to take. So it's like you could get so far, and then if you didn't make it, you see like how much further you have to go. A lot like Ghouls and Ghosts. How they show you the map. So something I always loved about it. But in home, I didn't get to play this game until Genesis, because we didn't have Master Systems. I knew like one kid that owned it, growing up, and I don't know if he had Outrun or not. I don't recall. I remember a few games definitely that stuck in my mind. That he did have that I played on Master System, but it was just such a rarity to find here in this country. We only had, I think, 114 releases on the console that came out here. I know the PAL region got well over 200, if I'm not mistaken. So, the library was limited, but this was definitely a game that we got here. And, and it was definitely a game that when you went to the arcade, you hopped on this thing and played it. I love driving games, especially, love the scaling of this. Just like there was nothing else really like it. Pole position, all those other games that were out around that time, they were kind of like primitive in comparison now when you look at, what Sega could do without. So
spot on, mate. Yeah,
that's my experience.
Yeah, spot on. Some great points there, actually, mate. Like you say, if you're just talking the arcade version itself, I mean, I'll chip in with my first memories of it. Is I played it in the arcades for the first time, and this were one of those like Super Hang On, like Space Harrier that just blew everything else away in the arcades. Nothing could touch it. Nothing remotely looked as good as it. Nothing felt as fast as it, and the fact that you'd got a cab for it as well was just fantastic. So the second this come to the Master System, I grabbed it straight away. You know what I mean? I was a huge arcade player, and I bought the Master System because I wanted Sega's arcade to hit home. Obviously got it as soon as possible, and you can't not notice the massive dip in presentational quality. That's just the nature of an 8-bit system versus an arcade machine, but it was still a real great stepping stone between the arcades and a home system, and it was still light years ahead of anything else that were around at the time. Like you say, I think I was a big BBC Micro player and ZX Spectrum player for friends, and stuff. They had games like Crazy Rider and that, and it didn't touch Outrun. You know what I mean? Outrun on the Master System was still technically way in front of all that stuff. So it's a good times, good memories. What about you, Rick? What about you, Chief?
Okay, so as I think I've mentioned before, I never owned or played a Sega Master System until like my mid 40s. So I don't really have any past memories of the Master System version of Outrun. So I only have present ones. But my original memory of Outrun is the arcade machine. There was this little restaurant that my friend and I used to walk to, and we would go get like cheeseburgers and play whatever arcade machine they had in there. They usually had like 1 or 2 machines, but there was 3 games. Like they had 3 machines that we would always play: Ghosts and Goblins, Rastan, and Outrun.
Nice.
Outrun. It was a stand-up cabinet, not the kind that you could sit in, but it did have a force feedback steering wheel, the gear shifter for high and low, and I think it had a pedal or 2.
Yeah, it would have had 2 foot pedals. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but it definitely had that steering wheel that would shake. Like if you went off road, the steering wheel would just like go back and forth and shake the shit out of you. And the music in that game, like we loved playing it. Everything about it, just like the tempo, the feeling, the atmosphere of the game. I personally am a huge fan of Ferrari, and the Testarossa is just a beautiful car. And they had the I don't know if they call it a Spider or something, but it's the convertible that's in the game. And I think they might have had to, I'll have to look it up, but I think they may have had to reach some kind of special deal in order to use the likeness.
That's correct. They had to get the license from Ferrari. Sadly, with later versions of Outrun, they've lost that license. That's why on my Switch version, which is the best way to play the Outrun arcade game, in my opinion, at home, they can't. The car you drive does have a similar look to the Ferrari, but they've taken off the Ferrari badge and put like an eagle at it. But it's a Ferrari because they've lost the license. So yeah, Sega did actually have a license and a partnership with Ferrari. They even made a Ferrari-based arcade game called, I think it was the Ferrari 365 or something. It was just a game where you race Ferraris. I can't remember the game, but I remember seeing it at the Trocadero in London. This is obviously during the period of when Outrun 2 came. But, sadly, they've lost the license to Ferrari. However, the game still retained quality play the newer versions. But back in the 80s, yeah, they had the license to Ferrari. And that's where they won with this. Because, like you, I'm a Ferrari fan as well. I think we all love Ferraris. I mean, who doesn't like Ferraris? And the 1980s design of the Ferraris, the Testarossa, in my opinion, was the king of them all. But there were so many different variants of Ferrari back then. But that's when
have you ever been in a Ferrari?
I have never. I would really love that opportunity. There are no ugly Ferraris. Every Ferrari is a work of art, and I love the Testarossa. So I got some past memories of like the Genesis version of Outrun. And I feel like the Genesis version was a pretty damn close port. They nailed everything. As good as the Genesis could do, the 3D scaling was pretty on point. And I love playing. If I'm not mistaken, there's a ROM hack for the Genesis version of Outrun that changes colors.
Yes,
to be
I've got it.
More
I've got
closely
that
to the arcade version.
Yeah, Gabriel Pyron did that. Gabriel Pyron is an amazing ROM hacker who actually restores the arcade color theme for Sega arcade games.
Did he did the Golden Axe one?
He did the Golden Axe one as well.
Yeah.
And he did. Although there is a better one than that one now out, but he did that one, and he also did a Super Hang one as well. So I do actually have them running. Although that being said, I actually like the richness. There's as a darker color for the original game. The more darker colors for Super Hang On and Outrun on the Mega Drive. And because I'm so used to playing it like that, I prefer it than the arcade colors, which are a lot lighter. Although it does have a nice bluer sky with the arcade one. So I suppose it depends on which way you want to play it, but it doesn't have a gameplay whatsoever. It's just what color themes you like. But going back to this 87 arcade port for 87, I think back and I have to sort of discount everything that we've said about the Mega Drive Genesis version, all the other ports that have come since an earlier version. There are even worse ports like this, like the ZX Spectrum one. I would never ever want to play. I've looked at all of them. Commodore 64 one.
ZX Spectrum one's terrible.
I know.
It was absolute bollock.
I would say for 87 going up to 1990, this is probably the best port. Actually, having a look at in the Atari ST and all these other versions that came out of Micro, if you want to play the Master version. They even tried an X68000 port, and that would have been great, but it got cancelled for the Japanese microcomputer. Well, I say Micro Game 1000 arcade Perth games, but this particular game, now playing it, and if we're talking about what I think of it now, going back and actually playing it through, it's difficult. Okay, it is difficult in the sense that you play the game. Okay, the road does meander left to right, and you have to be very quick because the vanishing point is quite close to the car. And I understand that they had limitations of the hardware, but then saying that the arcade version is like that. Now, for them to still create that scaling effect on 8-bit technology, for going from 16-bit, is amazing for its time. And I can understand why you were mesmerized by it, Dan, and why you liked this game when it came out on Master in 87, because it's literally, there's nothing quite like it at home. That's the key.
Oh, no, nothing could touch it. No,
nothing could touch it. Nothing could touch it. Now, playing this game, the controls are quite tight. They're not bad controls. One thing I'll say is, because when I did play this, I'm using a Mega Drive controller here, not the Master System controller with that floaty D-pad that's on the Master System, but I can imagine that can be quite tricky to control, because one of the issues I had when I was getting to grips with this game is gear up and down, isn't it? And you've also got left and right, which is on the same bit of control mechanism. So you might accidentally shift gears without not wanting to. So that's something that I had to sort of get used to. But when you're playing on Mega Drive control, it's easier to rock left to right than pressing up and down, because obviously the D-pad is on there, whereas the floaty Master one, I can imagine I might have had issues. I don't know about you, Steve, if you played with the original Master controller or not, but I played with the original controller. That's the only issue I had, is the gear changing with this game. The unforgiving nature of the turns was a bit difficult for me. I have beaten this game, but the only way I found that I can beat is not crashing the car once, because that does eat into your time. So it is definitely a challenging game, and it's not for the timid, but you do feel a good sense of achievement once you've beaten this game, because you have to avoid the cars, you have to avoid the turns. The trick is to stay on the road, because you lose speed when you go off road, and you can risk crashing into something. But yeah, ultimately I think it's a very, very good game, a very well made game for time. That's key, because like you said, Dan, just moments ago, there was nothing like it for its time. I've played it with the FM sound on. Okay, so obviously this music that we're listening to on this particular version, so moments ago, it's the programmable sound generator that comes in the stock Texas Instrument sound chip on the Mega Drive, so on the Master System we had for the time. Obviously with the FM module, which is made by Yamaha, it does make the sound a lot better, and it's worth listening to. Near 16-bit sounds, I would say. So it definitely enhances the experience, and that's the way I played it. But when you, obviously when you play with that enhancement, it it does change the immersive nature of it. You do feel more engaged with the game. For me, I'm definitely a sound. As for the graphics, I think they do hold up. For an 8-bit game in 87, it actually looks good. It does look like Outrun. It's not like as ugly as the ZX Spectrum rubbish and all these other microcomputers. This is actually a really good port for an 8-bit machine. So, I was very happy with this game. But yeah, back to you, Dan.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, a lot of points covered there. So, what about you, Steve? So, what do you think of this game now, then, Steve?
I think that I just got this. Like I've had the Genesis version, but I just got the Master System version. So, in my opinion, this right here is beautiful in comparison to what I grew up with as far as a game that's similar. This is a piece of garbage.
What is that you're showing? I can't see it. Is that one by Square?
This is awesome.
What is the game you're comparing
it was Rad Racer.
Rad Racer.
It was Rad Racer.
One by Square.
Oh, Rad Racer.
Oh,
yeah.
We did this earlier, didn't we? We talked about this, but yeah. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, this is the garbage that they gave us here, from Nintendo that we had in comparison to, the almost perfect arcade port for your home console of Outrun. It's just such a much better game. It just plays so much better. I love it.
Right.
I mean, yeah, Rad
Absolutely.
Racer, it had 3D. Like, you could wear 3D glasses and you'd have a little bit of 3D action. And that was kind of cool. But, as far as gameplay goes, you have radio stations that you can change.
Yeah.
Like, what other game gave you that back then? Nothing.
I just want to show you guys something. Sorry for butting in. I want to show you guys something because you made a point about radio stations, but I got the soundtrack for the Outrun 20th anniversary, and the sounds on this are so timeless. And it's basically, it's basically got the soundtrack for every port of this game, well, every major port for the game, and different variants of it. So obviously, there were actually 4 Outrun games on the Master System. This is the first one, the main port. Obviously, it was Outrun 3D. You could use your 3D glasses on. You got Battle Outrun, which is basically their version of Chase HQ or similar. And I really like Chase HQ. And you also got a later one. You never got it in America, sadly. It was Outrun Europa, but that's a totally different game altogether. So there's 4 Outrun games. And again, there's a soundtrack and the music for Outrun done by Hiroshi Kawaguchi, I think that's his name. Obviously, he did Space Harrier and all the others. It's just outstanding. It's timeless. Those musics have been remade, remixed, and made on all the different ports. So Splashwave, Magical Sound Shower, and Passing Breeze are just the 3 killer soundtracks. And I know Rick mentioned the Mega Drive one it actually has an exclusive soundtrack called Step on Beat, which I really like as well. But there's been so many different versions of the sound. It's worth keeping because I just love the music for Outrun. But yeah, going back to you, Rick. Sorry, back to you, Steve. I just cut you off.
Yeah, so I just feel like I don't know, like Europe got better stuff than we did now. Like America isn't all that great.
we supported the Master System here. That's why
I mean, my feelings on the Nintendo Entertainment System are no secret. I am gobsmacked at how popular it is compared to the Sega Master System, because as a kid who were kind of brought up in a place that had no real bias at the time, the Sega Master System just stood out as so much more powerful and better. And Outrun is just a great Outrun and Rad Racer, Steve. That's a fantastic example and a fantastic comparison, because you saw them two run side by side as a kid, and you kind of laughed at Rad Racer, really. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
When we finally got when we got Genesis and we just kicked NES to the side, that's when we really got to experience Outrun here. And but it's like you're going from console generation to console generation, so you would expect the 16-bit game to be better. But I didn't really realize that the 8-bit version of Outrun back then was so great. I mean, I wish I could time machine back to being 11 in 1987, or actually, I was 10 or 11 years old, and grab this game. I would have bought a Master System if I could go back in time. I mean, I did like that. I liked the NES, and it was cool that all your friends have it and you could trade games. Like I said, I knew one kid that had Master System, and I only remember a few specific games that he had, but I don't know if he had. I don't know. I don't remember playing Outrun there at his house, because I would have remembered it. Like I remember playing it in the arcade. It was a great game, and I loved it. And when it came out for Genesis, when we got it for Genesis, I bought it. It was one of the original original Black Box games, So I bought that game, early on in that in that. I wish I still had it. I don't have that my original anymore.
Oh,
I have a
shame.
Japanese. I play a Japanese version. I have the Japanese Mega Drive one, so that's how I play it on original equipment still. But same game. Yeah. I mean, man, it's just so. I'm just glad that I found it now at this stage in my life. It's a great game.
Yeah, nice one, Chief. Nice one. Well, yeah. I mean, nowadays, I kind of, this is one that you do have to kind of set your expectations aside slightly, because if you spent years playing all the races since, I think racing as a genre is one of the genres that has evolved to a lot, to a much better standard over the years. There's a lot of old school games like shooters and action games and even RPGs that are just as good and involved in certain ways as modern games, in my opinion. Whereas racers, it takes a lot to keep a racer special. But what I love, like Viraj has already mentioned it, the feel of this game for me is great. I think it's got a really great feel to it. I love that it's an arcade racer, not a realistic racer, but what it gives you is really great. I also agree with you, chaps. I think this is a tough game. I personally think. I'm not. Racing games are kind of my bane. You know what I mean? I like my difficult games, but I'm not particularly great on racing games. And I think this is the toughest one that we've looked at so far. And you've got to be really on point to get through it. But what I really like about this is I really like the fact that it is a little bip smaller, because it just gives it a different feel, and there's a bit more space to play. You've still got all that speed. It captures that speed brilliant. You've still got the tracks are still the same tracks, so you still pull the same maneuvers off, at the same places to get by it, which is great for when you're wanting to just practice the tracks themselves. And I think the time limit's spot on. Even though it's a hard game, I think the time limits are really, really done excellently. So the only thing for me is again, Viraj's already touched on it, that gear change. No end of times. If you're playing on a Master System pad, no end of times I'll catch it and drop into a low gear when I shouldn't do. So I agree with that. And I think the hit detection on some of the objects is a little bit wary as well. So it's that's where it's a little bit dodgy. But
it's interesting because you mentioned something, because I've got the I'm not going to pull it out yet, but I've got it on the shelf. It's the Game Gear Micro, and that's when I played the Game Gear. Obviously, I can play the Game Gear one on this as well. The Game Gear port isn't. A lot of people have this misconception that the Game Gear version is identical to the Master System, because there were a lot of Master System like-for-like ports being shoved onto the Game Gear, but the Game Gear one is programmed for the Game Gear, and in this one you see 3 lanes of traffic. There's only 2. Okay, and the Game Gear one still has that similar gear change issue, but it's very similar in how it plays. But if you want to play an 8-bit version, the Master System one is the one you want to do, because that extra resolution helps. There's also a point I want to make about PAL and NTSC. With the PAL version, you do have that wide screen, and it does make it easier because running at slower frames. So if you're finding it a bit difficult, play it on PAL. You just got to suffer with the fact that the music might be a little bit slower and sound a bit weird. But if you want that to have that feeling of speed, which we see in this presentation we have now, it's the NTSC version you want to play. But again, it's missing animation. It's obviously a scaled down port for arcade, but still very good. Rook, you've been very quiet. Let's listen to what you have to say about this game.
So my current feelings on this game, you got to understand that whenever I'm going to be reviewing a Master System game, I'm going to be doing it with the knowledge that it is an 8-bit game, and it's going to be running on a system with only half the power of the Genesis. So I know I'm going to be giving a lot of things up. And also I'm going to be comparing it to what was the competition at the time, which was the Nintendo Entertainment System, and my experiences with that too, with racing games. And as far as that's concerned, first off, the sacrifices made, there weren't many. Like the port that they did for this for the Sega Master System is so close. Like they nailed all the most important aspects of the game. The feeling, the look, the sound. It's Outrun. You're playing it, and it's really like it's a great port. It's a great arcade port for that system, and I was very impressed with the job that they did. Comparing it to like it's so funny that Steve brings up Rad Racer, because that's the exact example I was going to use. There weren't very many good racing games for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and probably the best one was Rad Racer. Outrun just
That was the
walks
best.
all over Rad Racer.
It was really. I played a lot of NES racing games.
Wow.
Because it's the only one you can compare to have that scaling feeling. So that was probably one of the better ones to play, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, scaling technology was in its infancy.
Yeah.
It's only with 16-bit that it sort of take off more with Mega Drive still struggled with scaling, and with Sega CD you had really scaling, and you had it with SNES. Really, racing really took off in the 5th generation with PlayStation, on it. Yeah, because it had that feel. You could actually replicate more of the feeling of simulation with Gran Turismo. And Gran Turismo changed the face of racing. This is like here before that arcade racing, having that feeling, and this is what Outrun is. It's that feeling of speed, that feeling of it's coming for you, that feeling that you're actually moving a car left or right, the feeling that you're actually moving the car as fast as you can. Yeah, Jaguar X, that's an amazing super scaler for the Sega CD. So is F1 Beyond the Limit is another one I liked, although it's very difficult.
If you didn't know it was a Jaguar, you would think you were playing Outrun. You know what I mean? Like this game is,
and
it's just a step up from the Genesis version, and it's a great game.
Again,
sorry for interrupting.
If it wasn't for Outrun and games like Outrun, we wouldn't have all this stuff. That's an important point I want to raise. Outrun, I think, set the benchmark. It was revolutionary in the arcades. This home port still had the feel and look of the arcade for the most part, even though this transitioned to an 8-bit port. The competitors tried porting it on their systems under license by Sega, but they weren't as good. So I think Sega did an outstanding job for its time, putting this with its limitations that we've all discussed. So I think we're at a point now where we can actually give our rating, right? So let's start with you, Danny Boy. What do you think?
So let's bear in mind when I rate them, you chaps are very you've got a very good point of view of for the time. I don't. I just rate it. I just rate it as I find it now. So I don't. As a kid, I loved Outrun. I played it a lot. But I'm thinking, how much do I want to play this game now? Okay, so how often do I put it on? And for me, this is a game I still play, but it's not a game that I'm addicted to or I play on a really regular basis. It's probably something I'll pop on like once a month. You know what I mean? Have a little blast on it. I think it's a really good game. I think it's very enjoyable, but I think those limitations do tell. So for me, it's a 7.5 out of 10.
All right, thank you very much. I'll go next, shall I? Pretty much want to echo what you said, but I look at it, well, with me, it is for its time because I didn't grow up with it because I was 2 years old when this game was released. But when I've played it retrospectively and I've played all the other Steam-bit versions of Outrun, and I play it for what it is it a game that I'd ever want to play again? No, because the other versions are better. That's the fact.
Yeah.
So I have to put it out there, but I have to look at it for its time and the limitations it had. If I love 8-bit games, and I do like 8-bit games, would I still be drawn to play this version? This is actually the best version of Outrun on the Master System. There are others I've played as well, but I actually like this game. Simplicity. That's what I like about Outrun anyway. It captures that simplicity. Okay. And yes, the controls are tight. It's a hard game, but I like that it's tough. It's difficult because the game itself is only 8 minutes long if you get from A to B. So you're gonna have to have it. You want a challenge, right? So I did like losing, and you are going to lose if you are going to lose at this game, but you learn from it very quickly. Okay, I need to stay on the road. Yes, I need to dodge the cars. Okay, I need to control my speed. The brake is your friend. The brake is your friend, people. Use it.
This is definitely a game where you've got to be heavy on brakes. You've got to be heavy on brakes.
But you've got to control your car. So I do love the fact that it's quite balanced. Even for a game as primitive as this, it gives you that Outrun feel. So that's why I like this game. And that's why it's a very good game. Sega, if you're listening, if you're doing a Master System Mini, and I hope you are, this game needs to be on it. I think stay before and put it on. I think the issue I have is like Jeff said earlier is with the gear changing thing. That's a drawback of the game. And I do think it's a tad bit too unforgiving in certain areas. I think you should be allowed to at least crash the car and still have a few more seconds on that clock because it is very difficult and you do feel a bit cheated with this game. So look, I'm actually going to give it the same score score you have, Dan. 7.5.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly the
nice.
same score. Yeah, 7.5.
Great minds, my friend. Great minds. Let's get Steve-O's then. What's Steve-O's rating on it?
So I'm gonna rate this the way that I'm gonna rate this against other Master System titles that I play, and I really like it, man. I love this game. I like that it's hard. You know, you have to be perfect on a lot of these boards, and the further you get into the game, the more perfect you need to be. And I think that's great that they, you know, included that into the game. They weren't so forgiving, you know. So it's made for maybe like a kid that's a little older that has the patience, you know, not like how I feel like Nintendo games kind of coddle us, you know, in a lot of ways that, you know, Sega didn't.
Nintendo coddled everyone all the time. And that's
Sega arcade games made men out of us, you know. That's
correct.
the way I feel. And
It's true.
I really like it. I would say, you know, I might not pick this game up and play it all the time, and I have other games that are Outrun, basically, you know, that look awesome. Like obviously, you know, XJ220. I mean, dude, this game kicks ass. The sound is awesome, and everything about it. It's like this is an arcade game, you know, at your house. Sega CD load time, though, I can tell you they suck, but you know, but it's still a great game. So I might play that. I would probably pick that one over regular Outrun. If I'm going to play a Master System game, this is going to be in my top 10 Master System games that I have played, you know. So I'm going to give this like an 8.5, you know, 8.5 for me for this game. I think it's really
8.5. Lovely. And finally over to Rick then. What's your rating of it, buddy?
My rating of Sega Master System's version of Outrun. You know, I love it when you guys pick games like this because I'm not really like aware of it, or I haven't played them yet, and I'm eager to see more titles that are like this that really show me the potential that the Master System had that I was never previously aware of. And I think it's a great, fantastic game for the Master System. I was pleasantly surprised at the high quality of it and the arcade accurateness of it. So I'm going to give this game an 8.
An 8, lovely, lovely. So
the Americans like it more than we do. It looks like these Americans really like this game, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's and I think you've got to remember that when it's fresh as well. You know, it's great hearing Rick describe it there. That, you know, he's had that kind of excitement that I definitely felt as a kid. But obviously, I've been playing it for 30 odd years, so you know it's a bit of a difference, isn't it? Really, but let me have a look at what that brings us to then with our final score percentage. So it gets 79%, which is a very respectable percentage.
Not bad for a game on a 2 megabit cart. Not too bad. Not bad.
Exactly. Yeah. And something we've not mentioned that, to be fair, I'm surprised we've not even mentioned it, and we've been watching it. It's got multiple endings.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean that's how many games do you know that make big deals nowadays about? Oh, is it got a multiple ending? Is it got, you know, you can have different endings? Well, Outrun in 1987 had multiple endings on an 8-bit system.
Great.
Yeah, you had replay value. You had like one route, easy route from left to right, and that's hard route. So you had 5 endings. So it had replay value, and that's a given anyway. I didn't bother explaining it because it's a given if you know about Outrun, but it's there. All right, left to right is the easy route for those who haven't played Outrun.
And you still see like aspects of it in modern games. You play GTA 5 per se. It's not really. We're not going to say it's a driving game. Obviously, it's an open world game, but there's a lot of driving in that game. Change your radio station game. You know, there's just things that Sega pioneered all that with this game. This is like the granddaddy of all of those types of games.
That's a great point, mate. A really great point. I'm just going to pop on a little bit of magical sound shower then to play us out.
We should.
I always pick this one. I always pick Mega.
This is the one, isn't it?
I'm a splash wave man, but some people like their golden showers. As you can see here.
Magical golden shower.
I like Pass and Breeze. Pass and Breeze is pretty badass too.
Yeah, but they're great themes. They're all great. Yeah.
They're all great tunes, aren't they? They're all fantastic tunes. It's fantastic, isn't it? You know what I mean?
It is.
Yeah. I feel bad I've only given it 7.5 now.
That sounds bad on the FM. Sounds better on the FM actually. You're using this original, but the FM is not better. Yeah. Good.
Right, we'll call it a day there, chaps. We'll let this play us out. Good to see you all, and we'll see you next time on the Sega Mega Master show. Sega!
Sega!